Every soldier has a gun, right? And a soldier with a broken gun is someone who takes up space and eats food.
Right.
And in the 18th century, the guns break. Right, and this is an 18th century musket, this is a French one, but they're similar. And parts of it break, most notably parts of the lock. In fact, here's one that's a broken lock. Here's a spring that broke. Now what you don't have in the 18th century are spare parts. You don't have standardization. Every single part of this, in fact, every piece of metal here came from England. Think about that. Had to be put on a ship, put in a barrel, brought to Philadelphia, put in a wagon, brought here. So you're not going to bring a jar of screws and find one that fits because it weighs. You just don't. It's not this sense of go get a new part, right? The whole idea is you got to fix what you have. And you have the talent to do that. So you have a blacksmith and then you have two armors that are attached to the armor. So maybe a soldier brings you a lock, or the sergeant brings the lock because the soldier broke it, and I need a new spring. For example, here's a 18th century lock plate. It's an original Brown West lock plate, and this is actually a spring for this lock plate. So if you look at this, the way that this holds on is there's a screw that goes through here and holds it on, and then this little bump here fits in this hole. Well, the problem is, you can see that's not going to
your gauge,
Right. Oh, well, we'll get another one of these and see one to fit. You can't carry 50 spare parts. Just remember, every piece of this is made by hand. This came from England. So what do you do?
They didn't have a spec, huh?
No. You have a guideline.
Yeah, sure.
What do you do? How do you fix it?
Custom build.
Right, the custom build what? What's the easiest way to fix this? To get this? So you have one of these, one of these.
Oh, well, like welded together? No.
There is.
Or you could
Is there welding?
Or you could like heat it and try to like bend it, and if it's
Yeah, but we literally have to move that back. There are definitely times when they do that.
maybe
Just-
you cut it off, and then you make the metal, and then pull
I'll
it
give you a
down,
hint.
and then
Take a look at that one.
Oh, make it bigger.
Take what bigger?
The hole? Oh, no, wait.
How many holes do you see there?
Oh, put a new hole.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And that's what we've forgotten how to do. How do I fix this? Oh, we'll get a new part. So you can see this lock plate, there's only supposed to be one hole in it. This one's been repaired twice. Because whoever had this gun brought it to the armor, or the gun fixer, or whomever, and said, do you have a spring? Well, I got 4. Well, this one's
Yeah.
close. What do you do? You drill a hole. Yes, there's drills. Yes, there's 18th century drills.
Gosh,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
gonna be all day. No?
You get the idea.
Yeah. It's 'cause would you heat it?
And a brace.
No.
Now, you can drill a hole by heating and punching. That's another thing.
Yeah,
In
that's
fact,
kinda
that's a
what I
better
was
way to do it.
thinking.
You can actually punch through, a blacksmith would have
Yeah.
a punch. But this is an original. If you know anything about any kind of work, if you've done any kind, this is an original. It's 260 years old. Look at those 3 holes.
Seriously, I'd screw
Look
that
how
up with a drill, but I mean, I wouldn't get it that good with
Look
it.
how close those 2 holes are.
Yeah.
Now, an 18th century drill bit isn't
Yeah.
a twist bit. It's just a double blade.
Wow.
So what you have in the 18th century is you don't have materials. You don't want lock bit. You can imagine what it took to make this by hand.
Yeah.
This flint's striking the steel, and you can see this one's getting pretty gouged up. This is probably a 20-year-old musket. So it's had its share of, and when this is happening, what's happening when you're pulling the trigger is you're striking this with friction, kind of like you shave your fingernails off a bar of soap. You don't see bars of soap anymore, but, and you're actually drawing the carbon out, and that's actually the spark. Right? It's the carbon in the steel that's making the spark, not the iron. Iron doesn't get spark, carbon does. And when you heat these up, the carbon kind of rises to the surface. And so sometimes when you temper a frizz and you put it in the forge, in fact I did that with this one, and kind of heated it up to try to get that carbon to kind of come out to the surface. And then you can actually buy carbon to get it to bake in a little bit. That's probably why we're getting the spark. But eventually you just shave all that away. So what do? Well, you throw it out, you put another one in, we already went over that, right? So what the armorers would do is they'd get another piece of steel and weld it to this. You weld in the 18th century. Piece of brass. No, you can't. There's 2 different ways
you
to
just
weld.
said we couldn't.
No. You get a piece of brass that fits into this, and then borax, which is common, okay? And then you just superheat it in the forge, and then you'll see these welded together.
okay.
Another way of welding it was called forge welding, which is nothing more than taking two pieces of metal and heating them really, really hot and just hammering the hell out of it. A barrel is forge welding. You know, a gun barrel starts life as a flat piece of metal. It's slowly wrapped around and then overlapped and then hammered together. It takes about 3 days to make a gun barrel. Three barrel makers in 3 days, sitting in a blacksmith shop, and they hammered around a mandrel in a mandrel that's kind of like this with a rod. And again, that's why these things are so valuable, just to make the gun barrel and then mold out. So interestingly enough, if you look in the museum, if you look at some of the muskets, if you look really, really closely, you'll actually see 2 layers of metal, and you'll be able to see, oh, that's one that was refaced on the prison. It's something I'm desperately trying to learn how to do, because it was like, oh, I read about that. I'm like, I'll go out and try that. Oh my God, it's really hard. I've broken like 4 prisms trying to figure out how to do this, but I got it to stick. I got the brass to, you can get it hot enough. Once you get the steel in a white heat, the brass will actually begin to melt, and that becomes your soldering agent. The problem is just the damn thing kept moving and holding. So it's that, wow, you really have to have the talent. And so in the 18th century, when you do one thing, that's all you do. But you do it really
They
well.
probably had to deal with the temperature and moisture in this, right? With gun front.
Good question. Common misconception.
Whoa.
You know,
My bad.
Well, they don't work, the black powder. No, that's absolutely true. I mean, you think about it, why wouldn't it? So, you know, when you think about how these work, and you're absolutely right, there's a hole there, and then you put some powder in here. But a well-made flintlock, once you close this, actually seals it pretty well.
It protects it.
And as long as you don't point it directly up and let the rain go down, and it actually can happen, it doesn't take much. I have fired guns in rainstorms.
Oh, really?
Now, one particular reenactment we were at, it was pouring, literally pouring. But fortunately, it wasn't raining when the battle started. So we'd fire, and it would literally, because these things get hot. And as soon as we'd fire, it just, this and that, this and that. And it was raining so hard that we're wearing tricorns, right? I'm sitting here, you know, and I'm firing away, and then you load it, and this and that, put the powder in. As long as you don't sit there too long, bang. And literally, it was drying out. It was so hot that the powder was drying. So it was hammering away. I was like, man, this is cool. It's raining. Because I've always thought, you know, what are you going to do when it rains? And like, it works.
Yeah.
And then one time I went like this, and I looked down, and my hat just poured
Oh.
water.
Man.
And it was like,
So every now and then you have to
I'm
go
over.
like
I'm
this.
done now. And it's like, it was just like, oh my God! If I were a soldier, I literally,
Would
I
be
just
dead.
would
Yeah.
not. All I have is a bayonet. So they'll work up until a point.
Take a peek. We are actually making some today. Sure. And I'll open this up. And if you peek inside, we've got the beef jerky going. Go home.
Wow.
Yeah. It's gonna be smoky. You can go right to the door. Don't go further in. Right to the door. Can you see it hanging right there?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we're smoking. You can see how smoky it is. It's
Yeah.
working.
That's all they do is smoke it.
So yeah, it's really the heat. The smoke ends up being part of the bonus because
But
you're keeping
it's
the
the
heat in.
drying.
It's the drying.
Like a
really.
dehydrated ball.
Yeah. Exactly. It's dehydrating it is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make sure that things aren't going to rot. So you have to dry as much as you can. So if your meat is dried, like the jerky, it's not going to grow, you know, it's not going to grow mold. The peas are dried, your rice is dried, your flour is dried. So those things are really the best things to be feeding the men. Now, of course, you're not really always giving the men just flour. You make it in bake bread.
Wow.
But there are sometimes they didn't have the bake oven set up and the men needed to eat, and they may have not had the bake ovens ready to go, so sometimes you've just got the flour ration and you had to do something with it. So mix it with water and cook it into a goo, or a lot of times what they're doing is with a mess of men, the one group of men, 5 to 6 men would share a tent, a kettle, and an axe.
Oh geez.
So together, you put your rations together and you make things, and most often it's a soup, because if you've got salt pork, and it's not something you're cooking over the fire, it's better if you get it into sort of a soup. And then if your bread is old, you can stick that in the soup. The peas, you definitely want to get those cooking, because you do not want, that'll break a tooth.
And those were peas.
Here's dried peas.
Oh, they're not green.
They are actually, yeah, these are actually the French yellow ones.
Oh.
They're from Canada.
That's kind of,
This was all in preparations to try to be ready to attack Fort Duquesne. And of course the French are keeping an eye on everything going on here as well, because as you're building a road and cutting down trees, it's noticeable.
Some of the steel here actually has Martian numbers on it.